Hello, welcome my bookish friends. I'm Elizabeth. This is Reading Riley, and today I'm going to tell you about all of the books that I read in August. It's a wrap-up. I read 11 books this month, but I've finished 9 of them. I had 2 DNFs in the same month. This is a first for me. I am getting better and better at DNFing, but there's still a part of me that is like, FOMO, hardcore FOMO. We're serving mental health. If we're not feeling it, we're putting it down. Anyway, so 9 books total, a pretty good mix of mystery, thriller, and horror books, which is what I typically read. As usual, I'm going to start with the lowest rated and work my way up to the highest rated, or my favorite book that I read this month. I do have one 5-star that I'm very excited to tell you about, so hang in for that. I'll also separate this down into chapters below. That way it's going to be easier to navigate if you're not really interested in hearing about a specific book. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to put my other social medias down here. Check me out over there if you're interested, and let's get into these books. Starting off with my DNFs, the first book that I DNF'd this month was The Force of Such Beauty by Barbara Bourland. And this one is more on the contemporary side, though I thought it was going to be something that maybe it is, but if it was, it took too long to get to. I read 55% of this, and at that point, the narrative had still not caught up to the synopsis. Like, that's too far into it to not have anything from the synopsis yet. In an idyllic kingdom far away, there's a princess named Caroline. The people who work for her are in the middle of a card game. She escapes, she gets to the airport, she gets on a plane, and then her captors are there waiting for her just when she feels like freedom is in her sights. She is our main character. And that is kind of like the synopsis. That's what I expect. She is trying to get away. She has been held captive, and why? But then when the story starts, we're following Caroline and we get to know her very well. She's South African. She grew up during apartheid, and she is a runner, and she was a very famous runner, an Olympic level runner. She ended up having an accident and getting hurt, and her career just ended. She met this guy. He turns out to be the prince, and then we're just kind of following her like throughout her 20s and her 30s. From what I saw, the prince seemed nice, and I get that it was probably setting us up that way as the reader, trying to make you see how one gets into an abusive relationship, because there's not really any red flags at first, and he just seems very kind and caring, like he wants what's best for her. He's warning her, hey, I'm a prince, you know, you're gonna have certain obligations if we marry. And she's like, yes, 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 I want to marry. I still don't know how she got to this point where she's trying to escape, but you know what? It was too much. It was too far in, and I was just not hooked. The hook never came, and so I had to put it down. The next book that I DNF'd in August is Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. I know, I feel really bad about this one. I loved The Last House on Needless Street. Like, an incredible story. Love that one. Did not really like Sundial. And then this one, I DNF'd. Don't know what that says, but the trend is going down. It's not going the right direction for me. I will say, like, I was in a terrible reading slump this month. I just felt out of it. So I don't know how much of my perception of these books is just me, like how I was feeling and just not connecting, or was the book itself. But this one also, there's a next layer to this, because I don't know if I was thinking about a different, in fact, I think I was thinking of Little Eve, another Catriona Ward book. And I expected this to be about cults for some reason, just based on whatever memory I had of this, but I think that was wrong. And so I did go into this with the wrong expectations. We're following Wilder Harlow, and he is now in present day writing the story of his childhood, where he grew up in this small town on the New England coast. His childhood summer with these friends. And at this time, there was a man going around killing people. It's complicated, but yeah. When he starts to write this book, he meets this new friend, Sky, and Sky steals his idea, steals his book idea, and runs with it and becomes famous. And then stuff is happening from there. Could not get hooked on this one. It definitely gives Stephen King vibes. I read 70% of this. Okay, 70%. I could have finished it. I looked up the twist and I was like, oh, okay. I don't know how it was revealed actually. Didn't feel like I was missing out on that much when I looked it up, so I don't know. I don't know what to feel about this one. The first book that I want to talk to you about is The Handyman Method. This is by Nick Cutter and Andrew Sullivan. I guess they teamed up on this together. I've not read anything from Sullivan yet, but I have read The Troop by Nick Cutter. So, going into this, what is this about? This is said to be a chilling domestic story of terror for fans of Black Mirror, which ding 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 is a trigger word for me. Love to hear that. And Amityville horror. However, I will say off the bat, I don't think the Black Mirror comp fits this. Don't think it fits the bill. I would not go into it with that expectation. We're following a young family who moves into this new home and this new development. Trent is the father figure in this family. He starts to lose his mind, I guess. I really understand the Amityville reference in here, so that makes a lot of sense to me. It also is kind of a cosmic horror adjacent The Shining because of the family dynamic and the mental state of our main character, Trent. He starts watching these YouTube videos with this guy, Handyman Hank, who is teaching him how to fix things around the house. And it's a brand new house and things are just breaking left and right. And you feel like he got shafted on this deal, like they sold him a lemon. And so he just dives in head over feet, fixing everything he can. And this handyman, Hank, is, I guess, giving him subliminal messages through this. My initial rating for this was 3 stars, but as I sat down to write my review, I could not help but just I had digs after digs and critiques after critiques, and so I had to move it down to a 2-star. It's not fitting my 3-star standard. I do feel like this is written in a way that only 2 men could write this story. It is acknowledging toxic masculinity in a way that feels exploitative of the horror genre, as opposed to shining a light on how toxic masculinity infiltrates our culture. This guy, the handyman who is influencing Trent, he's a POS. He's a POS. And he's very much reinforcing outdated values and things that make Trent into a really shitty person too. And I get that this is part of the horror, but again, just the way that it was used made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. It didn't garner much sympathy from me as the reader. So just saying that, I don't think it's bad writing. I just feel like for me, it did not work. Also, Nick Cutter has something against turtles. I said it, it's out there, this is not a drill. If you have an affinity towards turtles, steer clear, stay away. There is some turtle trauma, some tortoise torture. This did have some of the body horror that I would expect from Nick Cutter, and the ending of this took a turn that I didn't really expect, but I wouldn't call it like super twisty. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, I can't believe that, and like, oh, what a happy surprise. No, it went in a direction that I wasn't expecting, though that felt less like a twist and more like just like a bridge. Oh, and there was so much, okay, not so much. There were 2 instances that I remember of, how do I put this delicately? Vagina imagery. Him taking a vagina, using it as a metaphor to compare to something else, or taking something else, using the vagina as a metaphor to compare to that, something like a doorway or an opening and a vulva, and like just too much vagina imagery. Honestly, it happened twice, so I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is leading to something, maybe there's a bigger picture to this and it's trying to say something, and if that's the case, it went right over my head because it just got awkward at that point, because it never did. It was just these guys comparing things to vaginas. That's what it was, and so yeah, it was a little bit awkward. I did enjoy the YouTube aspect of this, the Handyman Hank part. I thought that was kind of fun, and the way that the horror manifested in this story did feel modern and felt unique, but there was also no structure whatsoever to this paranormal entity. Therefore, like, it felt like just excessive and ridiculous and over the top. I didn't have any parameters. It didn't make sense. So if you like your supernatural stories to, you know, have some kind of parameters and boundary or make sense other than just being all powerful, then maybe steer clear of this one as well. Let's move on to my 3-star books. The first one I want to talk to you about is called My Murder by Katie Williams. Now, this one, it's so divisive for me within myself because this is a speculative thriller, which I typically really love. And we're following Lou, who is this happily married mother. She's also the victim of a local serial killer. And so this is one of those like set 5 minutes into the future. I would compare this one to more of like a Black Mirror type story. And the speculative aspect was definitely what drew me in on this one. Because in this world, she has been brought back to life after being killed by the serial killer. In fact, all of this killer's victims have been brought back to life. And this is just a new technology and only certain people are given this chance. And the only reason these women was because there was such an uproar on social media. Lou's actual job is a touch therapist where she does this virtual reality thing and gets in a suit and like hugs people for like, it's like therapy, but touch therapy makes sense. But she's not actually touching anyone. So that's interesting because it's definitely VR. There are self-driven vehicles in this. There are little aspects along the way that I really wanted to hear more about. Like the world building felt like it could have been so much better than this was. But the little tidbits that I did get, I really liked. This is another one where I wish this story would have started at the 50% mark. There's a little bit in there about this video game. The storyline of the game surrounds these women who were killed by the serial killer. They're in a support group together because they've all been brought back to life and they're trying to navigate life now that they're alive again, you know, and it's just a really weird situation for them. But a lot of how I feel about this story is yes, but like every sentence, everything I liked about it has a but, which is just unfortunate. Like I really loved this concept, but I wasn't into the story until 60% in. I love that this was set in a future with this replication commission. Also, this is set in Michigan where I grew up, but there is zero atmosphere. Like it could have been set anywhere. And I really did not feel like that mattered at all. I also didn't really connect with the writing style. I don't know if it was the writing style itself or the narrator. That's the thing. I don't know. It felt like the narrator was reading an Elizabeth Acevedo. Like it was, like she was trying to make it poetry when it wasn't. I don't know. It just didn't work for me. I will say this is a cool story with a good twist. And I like imagining how things could go wrong in this world where you can bring somebody back to life. And the many implications of that I thought were interesting. So I would still recommend this story to someone who's looking for a near future character-focused story that actually does have a lot to say about like motherhood, and it touches on depression and the patriarchy and things like that as well. So if you like reading about those things, then I think you would still enjoy this. The next book that I want to talk to you about is Everyone Here is Lying by Shari Lapena. And I think this is kind of up her alley. This is what she does. She does domestic suspense well. We're following this neighborhood of people and the lies and deceit within that. There is a missing little girl named Avery throughout this story. There are two parents who are having affairs with each other. And she does a really good job of making you as the reader feel like it makes sense when some of these characters lie about, you know, one little detail because they're protecting something else. But then we know as the reader that that's going to bite them in the ass. Like we know that's going to come back around and hit them full circle. It's going to come full circle. And we're just kind of waiting for the pieces to fall into place as the reader. All of the characters are unlikable. None of them are likable characters. They're all pretty much assholes. You know, of course, this family has a son who's got into drugs, and then this family has a daughter who has behavioral issues. And that's kind of like another very big point of this story that I'm not gonna get into because I think it's just a hair spoilery. The pacing was quick, the intrigue was high, and all of these characters got their comeuppance eventually. They got what was coming to them. But even so, the ending felt a little bit abrupt and lacking for me. And because of that, I do think this is kind of just a middle of the road thriller. I don't think I'm gonna remember this for very long, but I do think this is a fun, like, beach read if you want something to read on the beach, to just turn off your mind and make you think about who is guilty and who is not. Shari Lapena does a really great job with that. And so, yeah, I would definitely still recommend this one. I think it's well done. I think this is a well done domestic suspense, domestic thriller. I just think that it doesn't really stand out for me too much, but I would definitely still recommend it. Let's get into my 3.5 star books this month. The first one that I want to talk to you about today is Fractured. This is the second book in the Will Trent series by Karin Slaughter. I'm not going to get into too many details about this one because it is a series, other than the fact that I need Sarah Lipton. Is that her last name? Why does that sound weird coming out of my mouth? I need Sarah from the Grant County series to come back in this series. I miss her, and I'm honestly, like, I'm not sold on Will Trent yet. I like his character, but I think I watched a couple of episodes of the TV show adaptation of this, and I think I spoiled myself for this book. I didn't think I was going to. Someone told me it was just the first book, but no, the second book was absolutely within those first couple of episodes that I watched. But in this one, this woman comes home and finds the door ajar. She's like, what's going on? Is my daughter still home, who's a high school senior, has been skipping classes lately. She's friends with this other girl who's a bad influence on her. Anyway, mom gets home, the door's open, finds some guy, bloody as hell, standing over the body of her dead daughter, and then she kills this guy. And then Will Trent comes in with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and solves the case. It's good. It's Karin Slaughter. It's not her best book that I've read, but I'm still going to continue moving forward in the series because I just know when Sarah comes back, I'm going to be so happy. And I want to read every Karin Slaughter book because I just respect her and love her so much. So that's all I'm going to say about that one. Let's move on. My battery's gonna die. Oh my gosh, y'all. My family's coming over for dinner in like 5 minutes, so I'm gonna have to put this up for now and charge my battery, and then I will probably actually come back tomorrow and finish this. I apologize. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. It's the next day. The next book that I want to talk to you about is Dark Corners by Megan Goldin. This is Rachel Crawl #2, the second book in the series, the first of which was Night Swim. And in this series, we're following Rachel Crawl, who is a podcaster, and she has her own podcast, I believe, called Guilty or Not. And it's kind of like Serial. If you remember the podcast Serial, it's like when that came out and it blew up and it was huge. That's what happened to Rachel Crawl. She's a journalist, she's an investigator, and she follows the case. So in this one, the story is revolving around this guy named Terrence Bailey, and he is in prison right now, about to get out of prison for breaking and entering, but the police suspect him of having killed 6 other women. There's a social media influencer, a YouTuber named Madison Logan, who went to go visit him, and then a week later she disappeared. Is he connected to her disappearance? What's going on? And then Rachel, the FBI ends up reaching out to Rachel because there is a connection to her as well. The one thing I want you to take away from this story is to read it via audio. Listen to the audiobook for this one. It's so good. Both of the audiobooks for Night Swim as well as Dark Corners, fantastic audiobooks. These are creating future audiobook canon. There is no reason traditionally published books shouldn't have audio all done as well. I always look for how well the audio is done, but especially in books like this one that feature some kind of audibly interactive mixed media like a podcast. And in this case, there are also, so we get clips of the podcast that Rachel is doing based on the story and what she's reporting to her audience, but then we also get like the third person perspective of like what she's doing in her day-to-day life. But then another aspect of this one that made the audio just really incredible was that we also get clips or like snapshots of found footage from this missing YouTuber. She was out in the desert filming herself like I am right now. And just imagine if this, of course I'm not in the desert, I'm in my house, but imagine if I were to disappear in a few minutes and then you guys found this of me recording this in my house. Like it's very meta in that way. and I liked that. The audio is stylized. Like, there are sound effects, things like that, but it makes for such a good reading experience, and I was so excited going into this one because of that. Another thing I really liked about this was this examination of this missing YouTuber. Because she's missing, they're trying to understand her life. Where could she have gone? Who could she have interacted with? But there is no trace of her outside of the things she posts online. They don't know what her real name is. They don't know, you know, where she grew up, what school she went to, any of these things. So there is this examination of her credibility, of her authenticity, because she is a social media influencer. How much of her bubbly personality, how much of her happiness is cultivated, and how much of that is absolutely authentic. So do we really know who the real Madison Logan is? And we're gonna have to find out in order to find out where she went missing, like where she is, what happened to her. The story was not perfect. The ending felt a little bit lackluster to me. I was able to predict the twist. However, I did have fun reading this one. And I absolutely owe this one for getting me out of my reading slump, because I was in a major reading slump this month, and it took this book for me to be like excited about it, to get excited about taking notes again. Like when I'm reading a book, if I like want to stop and write something down because I don't want to forget that, that means it's good. And this one did that for me. So I really did appreciate that. Oh, and Rachel Kroll, she's a bit of a badass, y'all. I really like her. She's very much giving early 2000s Ashley Judd for me. Some of you may not get that reference, but it's like a very like poised, strong, beautiful confidence. So yeah, I really like Rachel Kroll as a character, and I would definitely continue on in this series. The next book that I want to talk to y'all about is Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. This is, I ended up giving 4 stars to, and I've read this for the Midnight Society Book Club in August. There is a live show, I will link it above and below, with myself discussing this with Catriona from Catriona Brown, and Jordan from Jordan Reads. And it was a really great in-depth discussion of this novel, so check that out if you're interested in it. There is a non-spoiler and a spoilery section, but essentially this story, it's a horror novel with a lot of social commentary. It's referencing this camp in Montana called Camp Damascus, and it is the #1 gay conversion camp in the US, I guess. In the story, we're following Rose Darling, who is just graduating school, but she's 20 years old. And I guess in this, like, in her religion, they take 2 extra years as they're going through grade school to study the Bible. So she is now of graduation age, but she's 20. Rose was a really interesting character because she's gay. First of all, she doesn't know she's gay, but she's gay. And so there is queer rep in this book, a lot of queer rep. I mean, this is what this is about, and it's queer horror. But there's also neurodivergency rep in this, which I really appreciate because Rose is also on the autism spectrum. So Rose was just a really endearing character. I liked her a lot. She did read younger, and I think that was because of the nature of her being kind of sheltered from the world and things like that. I really enjoyed this one. It did not go where I thought it was going to go. I really thought it was going to be like this person experiencing getting brainwashed at this camp, but in fact it takes place after that. Yeah, Chuck Tingle really wanted to get across the message of queer joy, finding, you know, found family, like a sense of catharsis, that there are people around you that are going through the same thing, that these are the people that can help you go through this as well. And so yeah, there was that sense of catharsis, which I really enjoyed. At times, this was a little bit slower paced for me. It read a little bit YA, but I loved the message. I loved the character of Rose, and it did so many things in there, and I think a lot of people would enjoy this one. It's not as dark as I thought it was gonna go, but I love what it did with this story. I love the message that it's sending. And so if you want to hear more about that, then go check out my live show, and I'll link that below as well. The next 4-star book that I want to talk to you about is Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. This is a novella, and I've been meaning to read this one for so long. It was a perfect time for me to pick it up because I was going through this reading slump and I wanted something that was going to be quick. And oddly, this one is, even though it reads quickly because it's literally like 110 pages long. It is a bit of a slow burn. It's following this woman, but a slow burn in a very good way. It's following this woman, Chris, and her son dies in this tragic accident, and we're following her through her grief. This book and the next book I'm about to talk to you about as well are both going to be very deep dives into grief and our grief horror. I don't want to say too much about this one because it is so short, but Chris goes to the place where her son died, almost not even his grave, but like the place where he died, because that's where she feels closest to him, and she can't stay away from there. She goes every day to visit him, to talk to him, and she feels like he's there talking back to her. Like maybe it's in her head, but she doesn't really care because she's so desperately clinging on to her son. And one day she accidentally cuts herself and spills some blood onto the grave, and that night she thinks she sees her son standing outside her window. So from that point on, she's going to do more and more things to see what she can do to manifest the spirit of her son. Very much a tenderness to this, a tenderness to the devastation that is this woman's grief. The horror starts off innocently enough, but then it really builds and grows into this sinister crescendo. It's very devastating, but it's very easy to understand Chris's state of mind and understand why she's making the choices that she's making, but you just hate to watch it happen. You hate to see the degradation. I would compare the tone of this to Dear Laura by Gemma Amor. If you've read that one and you liked it, I think you would like this one. If you like this one and you haven't read Dear Laura, I think you would like that one. The amount of character development within such few pages is absolutely remarkable. It's worth the read. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I did. I can absolutely see why this story has become so popular and why people really enjoy this. And yeah, I think it was very, very well done. Read this if you like poised, character-focused, nuanced horror with kind of a cozy, heartbreaking sentimentality. The next 4-star book that I want to talk to you about is Whalefall. This is by Daniel Kraus, and I was going to give this one 3.5, but the more I think about it, as I sat down and wrote my review for it, I was like, you know what? This deserves a 4-star as well. Like, this was good. And we're following Jay Gardner, who has given himself a fool's errand, essentially to scuba down to the bottom of this bay where his father committed suicide months ago and get his remains and bring them back to his family so that they can have something to bury and someplace to visit him. But he's had a very, very complicated relationship with his dad his entire life. In the synopsis, we know that Jay goes down to the ocean and he comes across this giant squid and he gets caught up with the squid, and then along comes a whale, a sperm whale, that eats the squid and swallows them both. And so Jay becomes whale meat, whale dinner. The story has a very magical quality to it. The same kind of quality or the feeling that I got when I read The Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I guess you can't see it there. But it comes from this connectedness of the universe. It's got this almost spirituality to it, but not like there's no reference, I don't think, to God or anything like that. But you feel lucky to have witnessed this event and how everything came together in this moment. It feels like it vibrates with the universe and like, you know, like it was meant to be type of thing. My biggest critique is the slow start. I just felt like it was so slow to start. We have 2 timelines that we're following. We're in current time where Jay is, you know, scuba diving and facing this whale. And then there are past timelines that jump back and forth where we learn about his relationship with his father. And so at first there's just a lot of those flashbacks and you're like, oh my God, like, come on, let's get to the part where the whale swallows you. But once it finally does get that and the action starts, it does not stop. Like to the very end, the action is pretty intense once we get there. And the way it's told is, in the current chapters, at least in the current timeline, the chapters are labeled by the amount of air he has left in his tank. He only has an hour worth of air. And so with every chapter, it's like checking in, okay, this is how much he has left. This is how much he has left now. The tension mounts as that slowly dwindles down. Again, like Crossroads, this is an exploration of grief. This is him working through his relationship with his dad and facing his own, like, imminent death. Like, he gets swallowed by a whale. I mean, very small chance of escaping that. And this is also scientifically accurate. So he goes through, there's 4 stomachs in a sperm whale. And so he goes through each of the stomachs and he's in there and it's terrifying. I felt like I was in Jay's head. Like, I felt the anxiety, I felt the tension, I felt the terror. And the kind of disconnection from reality. After he's been in there for a little while, he starts to not be able to think properly. I do wish, however, that I had a better sense of his body within the whale. Like, I felt his fear, but I could not feel if he was, like, squished in there, or if he was floating, or if he was walking inside the stomach. Like, I couldn't get a good sense of the kinesthetic connection, other than the ever-present awareness of just sphincters everywhere. Sphincter after sphincter after sphincter. And I feel like his psyche crumbling is what makes this writing stand out above a lot of other novels of the like. Not that there are any other novels like this. There's a point where he's talking to himself, or he's talking to the whale, or he's talking to his father, and you don't know. Did the whale swallow his dad too, and they're just hanging out there together? For a minute, you don't really know, because he is so inside his own head, and he's like, his psyche is just barely hanging on by a thread. And this story itself is just very unique. It's a really unique story. This turns the isolation trope on its head. Like, I love the isolation trope. And so this is just another side to that I can add to these list of books that I love with this trope. All in all, I think a lot of people will really enjoy this one. So I would definitely recommend it. Although, just get past that first like 25-30%. And then it starts getting good. Okay, I have one more book to talk to you about, and this is a 5-star book. It was the first book that I read in the month of August, and I have been waiting all month to tell you guys about this story, because I think you're gonna love it. I loved it more than I expected. That is The Quiet Tenant by Clemence Michellon. This novel is at once both an eerily captivating exploration of the female perspective and also a volume of how Ted Bundy got away with it for so long for dummies. Like, seriously, this is Ted Bundy. If this main character, his name's Aiden Thomas, we're following him and he's a serial killer. We know up front he is a serial killer. He's killed 8 women. He's the guy in town that will come mow your lawn if you need it. He's a good handyman. He's very helpful to the people around the neighborhood, and he's handsome, and he's got a 13-year-old daughter, Cecilia, and he's got a woman locked up in his shed who has been there for 5 years named Rachel. His wife has died, and so they have to move out of this house. That was her parents' house, and so he decides to take Rachel with him. So we're following Rachel's perspective as well as Cecilia's perspective, and then we also have Emily's perspective. I think that's her name. She's a bartender and restaurant owner. Aiden is one of her regulars, and she is starting to develop feelings for him. So we get this story from the perspectives of the 3 women. Because of this, I've heard a lot of people compare this to Notes on an Execution. It's definitely less literary than that one. This one is a thriller. This is a thriller, but it also has a lot to say, which is why I think I loved it so much. Rachel's perspective is different from the other 2 because Rachel's is in second perspective and she is in survival mode. She is trying to survive this entire time, and so she is making this list in her head of things that she can and cannot do in order to survive, how she interacts with him in order to survive. And he's killed 8 women and kept her for 5 years, so she's doing something right. She has somehow convinced him that he doesn't need to kill her. So because her perspective is in second person, I found this extremely chilling. I do not get creeped out by books very often, but this is the kind of haunting that is actually terrifying. Like, not haunting like spooky ghosts, haunting like men like this exist in the world. You have roughly, I don't know if you know this, you have roughly 10 seconds from the point of being strangled to get out of that chokehold before you pass out and lose the chance to fight back. That is something that was in this story that I learned from this story. If you were being choked, you fight back immediately, because otherwise you lose that chance to fight back, because you will pass out. And this is the kind of haunting that this is, the kind that makes me want to take that information, write it down, put it in my back pocket, and then share it with you all so that you can maybe use it if you are in the unfortunate position of being one of these women who have to deal with men like Aiden Thomas. A line from Rachel's perspective is, your professor used to treat veterans with PTSD. One day he explains that trauma is what happens after you see yourself die. You witness the story of your own death, and it rings so true that you're never the same again. You don't get it until you do. And so every time while she's talking, she's just saying, you know this, you have to do this to survive. And it's this trauma, this just ongoing trauma for her, is she's saying you over and over again. And then another thing that a lot of people don't mention in the reviews for this is that we're not just getting her perspective in second person, but also throughout you get the perspective of the other women who have been the victims of Aiden Thomas, and their perspectives are also in second person. And so after a while, you're hearing them say, you do this, and you do this, and this happened to you, and this happened, until you start to feel like you are one of them. And at least from the perspective of Aiden Thomas, you are all the same. You all serve one purpose to him, and that is, whatever his will is. You are all of those women. All of those women are you. Both a searing thriller and an astute study of trauma, survival, and the dynamics of power. That explains it. That sums it up. It was so good. It was a fun, riveting thriller, but also it was terrifying in that it forces you to experience how women go through the world. So yeah, definitely highly recommend this one. Easy 5-star for me. Easy 5-star. Really, really enjoyed this one, and I think a lot of you will too. And that's it. That's my wrap up for August. Thank you so much for hanging in with me. Keep an eye out for my September TBR. I'm going to come out late with that, but I will try to get that up because I'm going to include my TBR for the Losers Club Read-a-thon that's coming up September 15th through 21st. I'll also link the video for that if you missed it above and below. If you feel like joining us for the read-a-thon, that's going to be a lot of fun. That'll be it for now. I appreciate you guys so much. Don't forget that life is short, so read Riley. Cheers and goodbye.